I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm taking the taboos of menopause and perimenopause and bringing light to the dark. No bullshit, no shame. It's time for us to gain a new paradigm in female health, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm bringing fresh perspectives from someone in the arena. I've been practicing women's health for nearly 20 years, and I'm spilling the tea on what it means to live at midlife, knowing that the best is yet to come. I'm sharing my Gen X approach to living through this transition. Sassy, a bit sweary, and always honest. Tactical tips and instantly usable information is my aim. I hope to make you laugh and that you learn something new that helps you embrace the change. Together, we bring power to the peri. Onward to the podcast. Hello, listeners. Dr. Fiona Lovely here of the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. And I have an author to share with you today that I'm quite excited about. Her name is Jessica Waite, award-winning author, and just on the verge of releasing her first memoir called The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards. Now, Jessica and I know each other. We've known each other for a few years now. And so I knew this book was coming out, but I did not expect it would be as extraordinarily written and a super compelling story as it is. I am about halfway through the actual copy. I've got an advanced copy. I just had it for the last couple of days. And I tell you, there's not many books I can put in the same category in terms of it being completely gripping and compelling and just written so amazingly well. So let me introduce Jessica Waite to you. When life handed her a riveting, horrifying, and surprisingly beautiful story, Jessica Waite transformed herself into a writer. She now harnesses the healing potential of storytelling to help others find their way back to joy and connection. Jessica is the creator of EndlessStories.love, a website for bereaved people to keep memories alive. Her memoir, The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards, is coming out with Simon & Schuster July 30th, 2024. Jessica's debut memoir tells the story of how, on the day after her beloved husband's funeral, she unearthed surprising revelations about the man she was married to for 17 years. A compulsively readable, darkly funny, posthumous love story about betrayal, grief, and whether relationships can have an afterlife. Epilogue. A side note, though, The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards has already been chosen by Goodreads, Chatelaine Magazine, Canadian Living Magazine, AARP, and the Toronto Star as the most anticipated book of the summer. Yes! I love this! Okay, so as I said, Jessica and I have known each other. You'll hear the story of that in the episode for quite a few years now. And she's been talking about this manuscript for quite a few years. So now reading it, it's so exciting. One of the things that she and I tackled was that, of course, she was going through all of this. Her husband died when she was 44, and she went through this during her perimenopausal era. And we have a discussion about detangling grief from perimenopause. And she talks about the mental model of grief and how confidence is tied into that, and whether or not that confidence or lack of it was because of perimenopause or was actually a grief thing. And of course, you of my listeners know I talk about grief being an important and commonly discussed part of the perimenopausal era for women for a lot of things, whether we lose a spouse or a job or ourselves, or our perceived youth and beauty disappearing, or the loss of our reproduction. All of these things contribute to this sort of sense of grief that a lot of us feel. And of course, Jessica Waite was experiencing this at the same time she was grieving the loss of her husband, the sudden and unexpected loss, I might add. So she asks the question, can relationships heal across the veil of death? And I promise you, whatever you think this book is going to be, it's going to be so much better than you could possibly imagine. So much more juicy and exciting. And yes, we are talking about Jessica's life, and somehow she manages to take something so devastating and spin it in such a way that it's like reading great fiction. I mean, man, I read a lot, and I'm really excited about this book because I know that it will touch women in a way that I think is going to be very healing for a lot of women. We talk about, Jessica and I, the vulnerability needed to write this book, to tell the stories that she tells, knowing very well that her family and her husband's family will read it, and the catharsis that comes from making her way through the story and telling it in her own way. And I ask her ultimately, does she think that Sean, her husband, would have approved of the story? And I love how she answers the question. So please go order this book. It will be available on July 30th, which is the day this episode is available to you, 2024. You can buy it all the places you buy your books. It is The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards by Jessica Waite, Waite. Now, you can find Jessica on Instagram at endless_stories_Jess. I'll put all of that in the show notes for you. Please listen and learn in this episode. It's a really touching conversation between me and award-winning author Jessica Waite. It's important to me that the supplements I use are of the highest quality, and that's why for more than 3 years I've been drinking AG1. It is researched and developed by an in-house team of scientists, doctors, and nutritionists with decades of experience in their respective fields. Quality for AG1 isn't just a buzzword, it's a commitment backed by expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, and rigorous testing. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because they obsess over product quality, the standards of manufacturing partners, and sustainable practices. It's easy and fast to use. Drinking AG1 mixed with water in 1 scoop a day covers my nutritional bases. Prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes for gut support, B vitamins and rhodiola for energy support, folate, magnesium, and ashwagandha for stress support, and vitamin C and zinc for my immune health. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D plus K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. That's drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. Welcome to the Not Your Mother's Menopause. I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and I'm joined today by my friend Jessica Waite, author who has written this extraordinary book that we're going to talk about today. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am absolutely overjoyed to be here.
As am I am so excited to talk to you. I mean, I can't get my words straight. I was like, what is happening? Okay, first of all, I'm going to put this beautiful book up on the screen because, as Jessica just pointed out, I actually match it. The book is called The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards. And this is Jessica's book, which comes out on July 30th of this year, 2024. And this is a memoir, yes?
It is a memoir. It took about 7 years to write, and it tells a story of my husband's sudden passing and then finding out shortly after his death that he had been keeping secrets from me. Yes, and then not the good kind of secrets, by the way. And then as I was sort of sorting through all of that with our young son, who was 9 at the time, strange things started happening that didn't used to happen. And it made me start to wonder whether he might be reaching back from beyond the grave, trying to make amends or like clean up the mess he made. But that was not really my belief system. And so I had to, in this like whole jumble of, what the hell has happened
Yeah.
and is happening, figure that out. And so that's what the story sort of the first half is like tabloid level scandal. And then the second
Yes.
half is like it's what do you do when you find yourself brokenhearted and betrayed and wanting to find your way back to love and trust, because how can we go on in a world where we can't trust anyone, which is sort of how I felt. Yeah,
I bet. Well, I would like to read the intro that you sent me because I think it sets the stage, and you just dropped some nuggets of it. But just so everybody's got a little bit of context for this conversation,
sure.
here's the introduction you sent me. When Jessica Waite was 44 years old, her husband Sean suffered a fatal heart attack, leaving Jessica to raise their 9-year-old son on her own. Then, amidst the chaos and confusion of their new reality, Jessica discovered that Sean had been keeping some very messy secrets: infidelity, addiction, hidden debt. What Jessica discovered rocked her world, so much so that Jessica went through perimenopause without untangling it from the jumble of big emotions and bodily changes she attributed to grief. Her new book, The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards, coming out from Simon & Schuster on July 30th, tells the story of her healing journey. It is, among other things, a candid look at the experience of grief and midlife and betrayal at midlife. Wow.
Yeah, and thank you for offering a space for us to talk about, like, I hadn't really thought until kind of, listening to your podcast and things that we talked about, the fact that I was having all of those hormonal, like, perimenopausal things just mixed in with everything, and there was no discerning it. And so I kind of came out of this whole, like, it took a few years to sort everything out, like fully menopausal, and
Yeah.
and without really paying attention. Like, how do you go through menopause and not notice? Do you know what I mean? It's a funny kind of thing, but maybe it's not, maybe it's more common than I think about when I characterize it like that.
Yeah, and very much. It's a great question, and a great sort of line of thinking is, for our generation, we are the sandwich generation, as we're called. We've got aging parents that for a lot of us, we're managing that. I've just gone through that myself. Um, and we have kids that are getting older, and we're, helping them develop their lives. Potentially they're going out in the world. And then we have the grief that comes with perimenopause itself, which is associated with potentially loss of many different kinds, whether it's a parent or pets or a great job or children leaving the house, or maybe it's a spouse like you've gone through. We potentially are also experiencing the grief of the loss of reproduction.
Mhm.
For us, until this point in our lives, for many of us, our goal has been the creation and raising of good little humans. And we as a society, we're not really, you don't really see older, wiser women the way you see the youthful women. We don't really know where to put women of our age that are wise, in terms of the media or what you see on TV, or we're lost in it. So the conversation about grief and perimenopause is not, it's new because we're not talking about it as much as we should. But you and I together having this conversation have both experienced grief along with perimenopause. How do you start to detangle that?
It's interesting because I think that, looking at things from the other side or another lens allows you to sort of see, like, untangle threads that were sort of woven in that you might not even notice when you're going through it. And as will not be a surprise to you, writing is I feel like writing is a tool or a technology of healing and helping to sort of get some things straight in your mind and get recirculating things that are going around in our head out of our body and onto the page. And so that's one of the ways that I have kind of sorted it out. And also I just wanted to add in, I know you know this, but this was in hindsight embarrassingly important to me, that I was kind of grieving the loss of beauty or desirability that I don't know if I ever thought that I had that or that I appreciated that I had that. But when I found out that my husband had been, cheating on me for years with that sort of thing, and I was like, maybe it was because of me, right? And then realizing like my age and that now I was going to be looking for a partner, and would anybody even want me? Oh, I'm starting to feel emotional, but I think that that's one of the big losses that we go through at this
Absolutely.
stage of life. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was saying to one of the administrators in my office who's essentially half my age. I was telling her because I think one of my jobs with the younger generation is to educate them about what's coming in the perimenopause era because it's significant.
Mhm.
And prior to our generation, it wasn't really talked about. We're just starting to really discuss it. And one of the things I said to her was, we become invisible at middle age. All of a sudden, people aren't looking anymore. And you ask for things to be done, and they're not getting done. They get deprioritized. And I am a loud, bossy female. It's part of what I've developed in order to be part of the profession I'm in. It's very male dominated, etc. So otherwise, I would have been just squashed early on. But I can't imagine if I didn't have those personality attributes, how I would be paid, would anybody be paying attention at all? Obviously, I'm not talking about other women, although maybe sometimes, but certainly from the opposite sex.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think so. And so I think there's that. I love that you're saying like we don't have to become invisible. Like if we're feeling that way and not feeling seen or heard or like we matter, like we can be our own mattering and stand in that, and like raise our voices and make sure that people can see and hear us. I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
And then the other side of it, I sometimes find invisibility to be a bit of a superpower. So if I can lean into that, like when you have that you're the fly on the wall. Do you know what I mean? Like the things that you can glean, or Harry
Yeah.
Potter when he put his
Yeah.
cloak over him and sneak around, and so that like to the extent that I can control how people are relating to me, I can embrace, like
Mhm.
what seems to be happening, and not turn it inwards against myself, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I love that you just packaged it like that. Because for me, I feel that and I'm like, wait a minute. People have always listened to me, right? Is it because my energy is so big? I walk into a room and people know I'm there. That's just my personality. Now, you know that because we know each other in person, but I'm not willing to be the fly on the wall. Just not at all. Like
Yeah, and you don't
I,
have to. You don't
yeah,
have to.
yeah. I remind myself too of this. I go, okay, when I feel like I'm not being heard, is that actually true? Or am I looking for the evidence? So Brene Brown says, if you look for the evidence, you're always going to find it,
Mhm,
right?
mhm. Yeah.
So I always try to kind of package it that way and say, let's look at this a different way. Okay, I can only imagine, like, we need to dig into this. So first I have to say thank you for sending me sample chapters. I have a copy now, but I started reading the sample chapters last week in preparation for this interview. And it's like I lost time. At one point I realized my eyes were gluey because I hadn't blinked for okay, I have been reading my whole life, and rarely does a book, the turns of phrase you use, the writing that I'm now. Did you use a co-writer for this, or is
No,
this
I wrote
you
this
wrote it?
myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So, like, I'm just literally compelled to continue reading. Like, I realized I was sitting there in my chair with my laptop reading this, not breathing, not blinking. My husband comes in and he's like, "Whoa, what is happening in here?" I'm like, "Dude, it's a really important time. Scram!"
I love that. Thank you. This is all like music to my ears, and
Oh, I tell
hopefully
you,
not inflating my ego.
you are a natural storyteller. When did you become aware that you had the gift of wordsmithing?
Oh, that I love. What a beautiful question. I have always loved reading and writing. And so that was sort of my creative outlet as a kid. I would write plays and songs and I don't know, like TV jingles and stories and that sort of thing. And when I was in university, I did a psychology major and an English minor. But in sort of around that age, like early 20s, I had this kind of gnawing feeling that anything I wrote I'd be embarrassed about later because I think I was like lacking some kind of life wisdom, or I was too naive or immature, hadn't had enough experiences, which I don't think that was necessarily true. I wish that I hadn't kind of blocked myself in that way, because probably it would be illustrative and, nice to go back and read what I wrote. But anyway, I didn't write for a long time. And so I lost all that time. And then when I lived through the events of this story, I was journaling because, like I said, I always used writing as a technology of healing to kind of process my emotions. But I kind of realized, like, the components of my story are not rare. People lose people in expected and unexpected ways all the time. People are brokenhearted and hurt by one another all the time. People feel signs of connection and wonder about, what's going on, and like that, all these things happen all the time. But the way they sort of stacked up for me was a little bit strange, and and a little bit, and so I was like, this is actually kind of a good story to tell. And then as I started to write it, thinking that someday I would want to publish it, it happened that, well, a few things that started happening, but I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of that. I just want to sort of get to the end of the answer of this question. As I was writing and starting to meet other writers, because I had to learn the craft of writing in order for this not to be like my journal, and so that someone would sit down and want to turn the page and wonder what would happen next. Um, I started trading writing with people, other people, and they were sort of responding, and then people would come up to me after and say, "Me too. I had an experience like this too." And so then once I knew that I wasn't alone, that was like the next level of my healing, like reconnecting, because grief can be so isolating. So then I'd
Mhm.
reconnect with someone through our shared story. And then that's when I really knew, okay, I'm going to put my heart into writing something that people will want to read
Mhm.
and try to publish it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you've just touched on something. I just picked up my Googler, as I call it, just to make sure I've got this word right. But I just feel like as I'm reading this book, there are so many people, women especially, that are going to relate to what you're talking about in this book. And the word I was looking up was zeitgeist. Like to
Yes.
right, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to me. And it's just from my perspective, it's so cool to read this book and know you. Like you and I have known each other for a few years now, and we've been talking about you writing this manuscript for a few
Mhm.
years now. So I'm so incredibly proud of what you've put out. It's extraordinary, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like the people listening to know that I met you in the, well, I'm just going to lay a little bit of groundwork. So one of the things that started happening fairly early on. So Sean died in November of 2015, and in January this year, the very first day that the library was open, I took our son to the public library to basically just start going back into the world and start doing our normal routine again after, the loss and then the holidays and all of that. And so I wasn't eating really almost at all at that time. And I felt faint in the library. And when I looked up, I saw this one book clearly, and all the other books were sort of blurred out. And then when I picked it up, it was a book that had a direct relevance to my life. Like, it was a really uncanny sort of experience of feeling like I was being guided. And then that happened more than one time. And I set up, sort of how that played out in the book, even though it happened more than more than what is included. But I was driving up the road and I saw this sign that had the same kind of effect, where it looked larger than the signs around it. And it was Calgary Brain Plus Spine.
Yeah.
And that was the name of your office where you worked. And I called the number and made an appointment to come and see you. And then over the many years of writing, the first rule of writing is ass in chair. And so I followed that to my own physical detriment. And I'd come
Yeah.
hobbling into your office being like, ah, and then you'd help just get me shaped up and back on my way. And so there's a real, I don't know, there's just a real way that our stories are interwoven beyond what's happening in the book. But it just, I don't know, it just makes my heart warm that I'm here now, and that you helped me being able to physically keep going in the telling of this story.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And I know in the years we've known each other, every time I see your name on my schedule, I'm like, "Ooh, that's going to be a juicy conversation. We're going to have a good one." So, and of course, we've bonded over both being writers, and my book is in progress. And as I am in the mind space of the literary world, and I'm watching what you're doing with this book, I mean, I'm so thrilled for what you've created. You've literally given birth to something extraordinary, and I have no doubt that you're about to find out just how extraordinary your book is through the mirror of other people. Now, I want to have the chat about finding yourself in that perimenopause and having the experience of grief. And then looking back now, I want you to look back at it. Just as you said, can you recognize which symptoms were grief and which were hormonal?
Well, not exactly, but I would love to ask you a question at some point in this
Yes.
conversation about a mental model of grief that I've sort of cobbled together. But we can bookmark that and just sort of bring this to. So I was having so one of the things that I noticed was if I had even one glass of wine, I would wake up with like a broken out in a total sweat, like total hormonal hot flushes, and so I I really I stopped drinking altogether, even though I was like, I would love so much
I
just
bet.
to have a drink. Um, so yeah, but I like, I don't know, was that perimenopause or was it grief? I had, my periods completely changed. So I was just having these like horrible flooding periods that were going on like for extended periods of time. And then it happened that, when I found out that my husband had been sleeping with potentially everyone, and I was
He
worried.
didn't approach me, just so you know.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I, I'm overstating that, but I was worried about have I been exposed to some kind of STD, and
Sure.
so I was had to go get tested, but I
Yeah.
have to like I'm trying to wait for my period to stop, but then it never was, and I wasn't really going to the doctor because I just didn't feel like I had the energy, and it always felt like between how my son was doing or what was else was going on that I wasn't making my like that aspect of my health a priority.
Mhm.
I mostly just had the energy for crying and sleeping and getting through
Yeah.
the days. But somehow also during that, I started thinking I should try to date. Try to date.
Oh my God, you
Yeah.
sent me the funniest excerpt, by the way.
um, but and it wasn't that I wanted to date, like I really didn't want to, but I wanted to kind of, see what was out there and also answer that question, that lingering, question that was in my mind about like, I felt so rejected and I felt
Mhm.
so undesirable, and I
Mhm.
kinda wanted to prove, is it right or wrong? Like, do you know what I mean? Am I right or wrong in my yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I don't know if there was an answer in there, but those are the things that I was doing, and things that I think were related to perimenopause were just my body completely changing over.
Well, here's what we know. We know that stress makes all of the symptoms worse. So, had you been in a lovely relationship that just carried on without any of the difficulties, and like who has that, by the way, then you may have cruised right through perimenopause without a single symptom. Isn't it interesting that the women on the planet that have the most significant symptoms of menopause or perimenopause are women in North America, women in the UK, and women in parts of Europe? Now, if you think about our economic model
Mhm.
in these countries versus other countries, some cultures don't even have a word for menopause because it's simply not, there isn't a need for a word. Isn't that fascinating?
That's super fascinating
Yeah.
because it is making me think like that the more we're maybe living in harmony with some natural cycles of life, then the more our bodies just kind of go through these natural processes without it feeling so devastating. But when we're,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
when we're,
potentially in some parts of the world, women just stop bleeding one day.
wow, wow.
I know. I mean, I don't know. I'd say most women, most women I talk to about this are like 10 years of some kind of crazy symptoms, if
Mhm.
not more, right? Okay, you talked about the rejection piece and dating, and I love the excerpt you sent me about your date, filling out the dating profile. online. Please read the book. It's hilarious. If I attempted to read it, it wouldn't, you'd miss it. You have to see it.
It's a chart. You kind of it's a you have to
Yes,
see it. You can't really
it
read
is.
it out loud.
It is very much that way. Okay, so one of the things that happens to us, at least this is one of the mental symptoms or the changes in brain function or cognitive function with the estrogen egress of menopause, perimenopause, is that all of these symptoms, plus a brain fog, plus we're not sleeping, plus maybe depression, anxiety, whatever, we lose confidence, right? At the same time, you're learning that your relationship, what you thought it was essentially not at all what you thought it was.
Mhm.
No wonder you felt rejected. And God bless you for thinking you could get
Yeah.
out there and do
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. And I'd love to throw in here something that I learned subsequently because like I said, the second half is a healing journey and I explored a lot of different healing modalities and listened to a lot of very wise scientists and physicians and other kinds of experts. And one of the things that I listened to a conversation between Dr. Gabor Mate and A.H. Almas, so a physician and a teacher of spirituality. And they agreed on a point of when someone goes through something devastating or traumatic, there's a kind of person who gets better and can recover and a kind of person who doesn't. And the person who doesn't is unwilling to change, to let go of their old identity and embrace what the new identity that's formed from the experience that they've gone through. And so like to me, isn't menopause like the thing
Yes.
that it's like shedding those old identities and then moving in and so I think that like when you spoke about confidence, that what was lacking, that's what was really destroyed in me, like confidence, self-esteem, belief in myself in the future. And it took some amount of courage to like step into trying to move toward that other identity. Like in that in that chart, the dating chart, it was like it was my if I answer honestly to the questions that they ask you in an online dating profile, and one of them was like your marital status, and I lied, quote unquote, lied and said separated with an asterisk, and I'm like separated by death, and fuck you for trying to call me a widow because
Exactly.
because I didn't want to identify as a widow. So I was unwilling to change my identity from what it had been. And so, anyway, but I think this is one of the things that I think is a gift of both grief and menopause is that it strips those old identities away from you and it helps you if you're willing to have the courage to step towards something new,
Mm.
to grow into that. So yeah.
It brings tears to my eyes to hear you actually say that. And, I think of menopause, perimenopause as a spiritual transition. I have a friend that refers to it as the midlife portal for women, which I think is a really cool way to look at it. And also, it's a crucible. It really is. We
Yeah.
come out on the other side, but we have some control over how it looks when we get onto the other side of it. And you have just kind of dropped another piece in there and said, it's actually about, are you willing to let go of the identity of whatever the premenopausal thing was? We think,
Mhm.
I mean, you can look at it from a sort of a sociological point of view and say, okay, well, a woman loses her ability to reproduce. And for a lot of women, that's all they've ever wanted to do. And so, of course, there's going to be a spiritual journey with that. But it's much, much bigger than that. And I think I'm pretty sure that the quote of this episode, although we've still got some to go, is going to be what you just said. So watch for it on social media, everybody, because I think that will liberate a lot of people. And I actually think your book is going to do that too. And I want to dig into the writing a little bit because again, book nerd right here. I've been reading my whole life. I can see you're surrounded by books. I am too. They're just not in, they're on either side of me.
Yeah, so you can see them. Yes.
Yes, yes, exactly, because they're like friends. That's what my husband's always like, okay, well, are you going to clear out some books? I'm like, dude, my books are my friends, man. They're friends. Like, we went through a journey together. Like,
Yep.
we've had a relationship.
Yep. Me too.
And some of them more than others, right? Some of them are so highlighted and dog-eared and have the little tape stickies on the outside to say, go back and look. And so to find myself, first of all, to know you and to have spent years at this point talking about the creation of this manuscript, knowing a little bit about your story, and I came on the scene about 2.5 years, about just, yeah, 2.5 years after Sean passed, by the way. And I remember that was one of the first things you told me. So you just kind of came in with that story attached to you at that point, interestingly enough.
Hmm,
And you were probably already writing this manuscript then at that point. Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. For me to get so pulled in by the language of a story that I sort of already knew, again, I think it's going to be a massive hit. And you've been chosen by Goodreads, Chatelaine, Canadian Living, AARP, and the Toronto Star as the most anticipated book of the summer.
Well, yeah, one of them. They do, they do those like must reads for the
Yeah.
summer. And so, yeah, they actually, someone just sent me the Goodreads email yesterday that it was like the five
Oh,
like memoirs,
yes.
and my cover was on there. I know. I was like, yeah, so
Listen,
exciting to see that.
I had one of the massage therapists yesterday in the office. I was telling her about this book. She's like, well, can I borrow it? I was like, no. She's like, well, why not? You've got it in your hand. I said, well, first of all, it doesn't come out till July 30th, and I get to read it first. And then I said, go buy it. You can buy the Kindle version for, I think it's 13.99 in Canada,
Yeah,
anyways. I don't know.
yeah, and yes. Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So listen, the women were fighting it over it in the office yesterday. They were like, well, I could just have that. No, you cannot.
Amazing. And
That's
tell them they can put it on hold at the library too.
oh yes.
That's a little known fact that when you take out a library book, or like authors get paid a tiny amount of money for having books in the library. And so if you're someone who doesn't like to spend money on books for whatever reason, like requesting it from the library actually helps authors too.
Because then
So
they'll bring in more copies.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I
Mhm.
love that. Okay, thank you
Yeah,
for that hot tip.
you betcha.
Accessible information is what we're all
And
about
one
on the
other
show.
thing,
Yes,
this is
please.
about the narrator for the audiobook of this
Yes.
book. I can't believe we got her. She's a legend in the audiobook world. Her name's Cassandra Campbell, and she's won multiple Audie awards, and she's been given like the Lifetime Achievement Award. And so I feel like it's probably going to be enjoyable as an audiobook too. So just if people like
Okay.
to get their books that way, I think that we're in for a treat. I haven't heard it yet, but
I
I
bet
actually, and it's
it's
going to be trippy to listen to for me. Like,
I bet.
yeah, I think
I
so.
bet.
But anyway, yeah, moving on.
Okay, well, I want to go there. I want to go what you just touched on. But before I do, I just am reminded that somebody told me we have uh, an adoration of Liz Gilbert in common, you and I, and you've been taught by her, as I recall. But I remember somebody telling me to take her book Big Magic and actually listen to it on audio. That's one of those books that is dog-eared and highlighted
Yeah.
three different colors, and to listen to it on audiobook because it's even a different experience, it's even more enhanced, and that was very true. So I hope very much your book will be that way too, especially when you've got somebody that's amazing to narrate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super excited about that. I can't
I
believe
bet.
my good
I
fortune.
bet.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what it's like to write a book that is so stinking vulnerable. I mean, you are sharing the personalist of most personal details. And as we started out this conversation, you said to me, I'm not the big sunflower. I'm the hosta in the garden hiding under the eaves that likes the dappled sunshine.
Yeah. Yep.
So, what was that like? And how does it feel knowing people that know you are reading the
Oh
depth
my God.
of that pain?
Yeah. Okay. So, two things. When you're writing, so this is for anyone who ever thinks they might or wants to write a book, the most freeing and important thing you can do is to just write it and just imagine that no one is ever going to read it, but you have to be honest and tell the truth and write it out. And so that's part one. So I did that. And that was the therapeutic and cathartic part of the
Mm.
process, right? And so that's why you do that. You do that to see for yourself and heal yourself. And then when you're starting to shape the story and make it for a reader, you start to have to bring the reader in, and that's what all of the like self-consciousness and the fear of judgment and all of those things start to come in. And so that's not easy, and that's when it's like time to start stepping into courage. And one of the things that I've learned is like I don't know how to say this. I wish I had a better sort of medical or like a metaphor, but this medical thing's coming. But you're a doctor, so I was like, I think of courage as almost being like the surgical tape that like stitches things together and then helps you kind of if you're trying to like defragment all the pieces of whatever has blown up, that little bits of courage like they made me feel better about myself when I would do something brave, and it made me to start to, like, get some capacity because the thing that I was afraid of, I did it and I didn't die, and then and so anyway, just, like, little micro acts of courage helped me prepare to start to share this story more vulnerably, and now that it's coming out, like, in a bigger way, and I've had to weather the storm of, like, you know, someone that I really love didn't like the title. I don't blame that person at all. It is scary and shameful. And so, like, I have compassion and empathy for that, and that person's I don't know if they still are, but they were mad at me, and I didn't die. I didn't die from them being mad at me. And so, I just keep kind of going along like that, like, just building up my courage and testing that muscle. And then the last thing that I wanna say, say because this also feels super relevant, is, like, from the title, you might think this is a book that just wants to bash Sean and throw him under every kind of bus, but that wouldn't be a true story because he had these aspects of himself that he was hiding because he was very ashamed. I think there was a mental health component. I go into some of that. I wrote this story in a lot of ways to sort of investigate that because I was curious about, well, who was he really? What was going on with him really? And I showed him at his worst moments. It would not have been fair if I didn't also show myself at my worst moments. And so, as much as I'm afraid of like people being like, well, look at like with some of the things that I cop to that was ashamed of, and I'm less ashamed now. And so I've leapt over the hurdle of it's like shame can't survive the light. You talked about Brene Brown earlier.
Mhm.
Like it's this is the thing. I don't know. So anyway, that's a long answer, but I hope that it's making sense.
I want to tell you about Metabolism Fixer. It's an innovative supplement designed to optimize your metabolic rate. It features T2, a key ingredient that enhances your basal metabolism. Metabolism Fixer helps your body efficiently burn calories even during periods of rest. The formula includes Suppressa, a patented ingredient clinically shown to reduce snacking by 55% and decrease appetite by 69%. Suppressa and T2 are a powerful combo that address both metabolic function and appetite control. Metabolism Fixer is designed to complement various dietary approaches like keto or paleo. It offers a unique mechanism for weight management, providing a side effect free alternative to GLP based solutions, and it tastes great. Its key benefits include appetite management, blood sugar stabilization, modulation of the stress response by reducing stress related eating, enhanced fat metabolism, and it works fast. You can try Metabolism Fixer at betterlifedoctor.com/lovely and use the code lovely10 for 10% off your order. That's betterlifedoctor.com/lovely. Thanks, Metabolism Fixer.
Yeah.
Basically, what you're saying is the process of writing this story and compiling the pieces of it was deeply cathartic and is likely the reason, or at least a good portion of the reason, that you are on the other side of this experience, changed for the better and not mired in the grief of being called a widow and the experience you've had.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think like even for people who don't ever like want to write or care about that, I think that the idea of like your life flows up, there are pieces everywhere. Like the first thing you need to do is gather them up and see like, well, what is left? Like what are these shards and remnants? And then what am I missing that might need to be filled in? And then like our first instinct is going to be to try to put it back to what it looked like before. That's our old identity,
Mhm.
but it doesn't fit that way. And so you have to take them, you don't have to do anything, but I'm saying I think that a goal or an ambition could be to look at them and be like, what else can I make from this? And how am I going to reshape like the next part? And that when we're doing that and we feel agency and we feel hope and we get our capacity back because we're not having to like look everywhere scanning to find the pieces we've brought them in. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
feel that's sort of the metaphor.
You touch on mental health. One of the chapters I read was the Highway to Helena chapter.
Mhm.
And I know you enough to know that I was heartbroken and breathless as I was reading that chapter for you. And I think a lot of, ooh, I mean, we're having a much bigger conversation about mental health these days than we ever have. And women generally, we're better at talking about mental health than men are.
Mhm.
Because of course males have that whole hyper masculine and that's what you're rewarded for and you don't talk about your feelings and you certainly don't show your feelings. And do you have a sense that writing that particularly vulnerable story is going to perhaps open a door for others to see either that behavior in themselves or in other people they love? And, where do you see that all going?
Yeah. So what happens in that chapter is that we're on a road trip, driving from Calgary to Denver, Colorado, and Sean ends up having a kind of meltdown. And I think in hindsight that what was required in that moment was some kind of medical intervention, but it all came to a head when we were in Helena, Montana, a place that we had never been before, and I didn't know there was no real avenue to like get him to a doctor. And I'm just pausing because like something like this is again something that came to light for me in the writing was that like years before that I had promised he had had a episode of poor mental health, and I had promised he asked me to promise that if he ever got like that again that I would tell him. And I said, I can't tell you. I can't promise that because you won't believe me when you're in that state. And so I can't be the person who manages this for you, but the only thing I can do is take you to a doctor. And that then when it did happen again, I did not take him to a doctor. And it's like that piece of the like I feel guilty around that. And so I hope that someone who would read the story and could see behaviors like that in someone who they love might start to see like, oh, this isn't just that person being an asshole, or it isn't just like, it's like that maybe there's some other piece required that's more than I'm able to give. Because that's sort of what it was for me. Like we needed more support than I was able to give. And yeah, and that was just Sean was gone just a few months after that. That was close to the end of his life. Yeah, maybe I'll just stop. Did I answer the question? Like,
Yes, I think you did. I
yeah,
think you did. I think it is my belief that anytime we talk about the stuff that's in the shadows, it doesn't have power of us over us anymore if it can't linger in the dark.
yeah,
And I mean, you're talking to somebody who is worked with the taboos of women's health pretty much since day one of my practice, right? So I'm quite happy to talk about them and pull the curtain back and just be like, no, look, this is what can happen, but we need the supports medically. And I know
yeah.
you, yeah.
There's one other thing that
Mm,
I think feels important about this, which is that you were saying about how it's different, like men have a different rules apply to them culturally about
mhm,
what they are and aren't allowed to show. And so it's even, I feel maybe harder in some ways, like because there's so much stigma, because they feel like their career could be affected. That's certainly how Sean felt, that even though he knew he had some issues, he tried to self manage them, and he made me promise never to tell anyone. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we'll handle it. Don't
uh,
tell anyone.
yes.
And so I agreed to that. And that's another one of my big regrets, was that by me promising to keep his secret, I put all the onus on me. Do you know what I mean? It's like if there was
Mhm.
anything that I couldn't do, it wasn't available because I would have had to disclose to someone else. And so that is a thing. And I think I probably do say this in the book that I regret, like, like that. It's a strange thing because privacy does matter and you need to be able to have safe, trustworthy containers. But there's a degree to which over privacy stops support from coming in. And that's what I needed. I needed to have more support to be able to backstop the the whole situation for my family.
Well, and the thing is we as spouses, we do the best of our ability in the moment, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
as society changes, I mean, I think about when I told my mother about my divorce. I have had two husbands. My first husband was in my 20s when I was in my 20s. And when I told my mom, no one in my family had been divorced before that, not a single person that I was aware of. And when I told my mother, she said to me, she said, "Do you want me to tell your grandfather?" And I knew that was going to be a really tough conversation, like old school, right? And my grandfather's response was not, "How is she doing?" Actually, I think what he said first was, "She always was a bit fast for him." Isn't that awesome?
oh bless,
I'm
that's
like,
hilarious.
oh, grandpa. Anyways. And the second thing he said was, "Don't tell anybody in town." So these older generations, the older way we did things was we hid the infirmity,
Yes,
right?
yes,
We hid the things that made us separate. And of course, generations ago we did that because those things, the things that made us the tall poppy, we were the ones that got cut, right?
yeah, yeah,
The weirdos, the spiritualists, the medicine men and women, we were the ones that got drowned and burned at the stake and flung off the mountain. So there's an ancestral thing that happens there. There's a
yeah.
lineage of trauma there. And the only thing we can do in the moment is just be the best supportive spouse we can be. And you promised to keep his secret because that's what felt most supportive in that moment. But things have changed.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly right, and that's also from my family of origin how I was right. Like that is how you supported. You support by, and I love what your grandpa, like that he kind of like acknowledged there was a mismatch there, right? So he's like on your side in the sense that like I can see why it didn't work out. So I'm cool with it, but don't tell anyone. Like
Don't
so
tell.
that it's like both of those things. Like it is that kind of thing of creating that sense of safety. So
Well, and
yeah.
thank you for being my therapy in that moment because I had never seen it quite like that. My grandfather was a man of few words. And so to think that there was some affirmation in that first statement, I just thought it was funny as hell, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I also remember friends of theirs had a grandchild that was born with a sort of a rare disorder, and only the closest family friends were allowed to know about that and meet
Mhm.
the infant,
Mhm.
and everybody else was told not to talk about it, which was just so heartbreaking for me as a young woman. I was like, but how do you get support? How do you, and the child passed before it was a he, if I remember, before he was even a year old, but which was what the expectation was. But again,
Mhm.
things have just changed. We're a lot gentler around these things. And
Yeah.
I'm personally here for the conversations around mental health. They are a massive part of the perimenopausal transition, and we are learning more and more and more about that every day. But what I find interesting is that I'm seeing in my office the trend is, as you know, because you've been with me, my question to my patients is, what are we working on today? And sometimes people come in and say, it's my elbow, it's my low back, it's my neck, I headaches, whatever. But I'm seeing more and more come to me say, I'm struggling with this, and it's a life thing.
Mhm.
And what I find really interesting is it's more young and males and females that are talking about this. It's the kids that are doing it differently than you and I did it.
Mhm. I see that too because I have a almost 18-year-old.
He's
And
18.
I know. And he just graduated from high school. And it's funny when you're saying about the grief of like he graduated from high school on Monday and 2 days later left on a giant bike trip. He's riding his bike from Banff to New Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's just like and then, like, through remote places, I won't be hearing for him for long stretches of time. Anyway, now I forgot what I was saying. Oh, yeah, because among his friend like, as he was even I can use this as an example, um, as we were getting ready to go, like, his friends were coming over to say goodbye, but in a very genuine, heartfelt, relational way, "I'm gonna miss you." Do you know, like, that kind of thing that, like, guys in my era would have never, ever
Nope.
done that, and so I feel that there is a big shift happening and for the good and for the just like yeah, in just probably I guess that would be 2 generations from don't tell
Mhm.
anyone the baby is
Mhm.
ill to
Yeah.
we can talk about lots of things.
Lots of
So,
things.
yeah.
I think it's 3 generations if we're talking about Dash. So, by the way, let's talk about this. So, one of the rules of memoir is you don't use real names.
Mhm. Well, I don't know if that's a rule of memoir. I think that there's some flexibility there. So I used almost all real names. I changed the names of the people whose behavior would they would not wish to be named by their real name, except for Sean and me. Like, but I asked everyone who I named if they would prefer a pseudonym or their real name, and that almost everyone said, I'm happy with my real name." So that everyone is almost everyone's real names are in there.
Is your how's your family feeling about this? Because it does name them.
Yeah, they're mostly extremely supportive. My Sean's sister Megan and a friend of mine just organized this big bookmark making party, and so we got
I
together and
saw.
we made bookmarks for, like, everybody who'll come to the launch at WordFest on July 30th evening at 7 o'clock. So that's so great. Like that's his sister. Another sister-in-law has been helping me a ton with like getting the word out. My nieces and nephews have been amazing. I have a niece who's a professional animator, and she made the most amazing animated trailer for this book. It's on my website at the end of the show. Well, I'll say it now. Go to Jessica Waite, WAITE.work, and you can see this trailer. It's just beyond. So yeah, it's really been fun to have people, supporting and yeah, just standing because they like I think they know um what is at the heart of the story, and it's something that they can face the shameful and humiliating parts that are necessarily sorry to tell it to get to that more expanded version of love at the
Well,
end.
and your family members would have had their own interactions with Sean and probably had some suspicions about all kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. And then and the like for the brothers that are not thrilled with the title because more people will see the title than read the book. That is the big objection, which I agree, and they're 100% right. But if I recall, they did call Sean a choice name or two in their life at certain moments, and this is how things are with people that we love. We have ups and downs. We have anger, and we make
Mhm.
have resolution to conflict and yeah.
And we have to remember that your publisher has the business side of it is the publisher has invested a great deal in this book. And
Yeah.
so the title, it literally snaps your head up.
And
And I think that is a very good thing. Please go on.
thank you. No, that's the other thing that like anyone who knew Sean would know. He was a brilliant business person. That He had a very strategic mind. And I know, well, I don't know, I can't know for sure, but I have a high degree of confidence that he would be so proud of me for using a title that makes people pick up the book and then look on the back to see what it's about. That is the job of a title. And so this does a very good job. And it was also suggested by one of his best friends who knew him very well. So it's not so I have yeah, he suggested something really close to this. And so when I ended up going for it, we both felt like Sean would be okay with it. And so I have no regrets about
Good.
going with this
Good.
title. Yeah.
It's a shocker and it's the perfect introduction to this book that will snap your head back so many times in so many ways. I cannot overstate just how exquisite your storytelling is. I mean, it's going to pull people in. This will be the kind of book where people stay awake all night to finish reading, even though they have a meeting in the morning or have to go to work or school in the morning, for sure. For sure. So I want to get an idea from you if you know or have a sense of how Sean would feel about this book.
I have a sense. Okay, I'm gonna really go for it. I have a sense that Sean has been helping with this book from the very beginning, and that Sean it would let me just say this. If Sean were helping me from the great beyond, my book would have just come out as a Goodreads suggestion yesterday. My book would be on Chatelaine and Canadian Living and AERP most summer recommended reading list. It's like if Sean were helping me from the great beyond, things would be unfolding exactly as they are. And I don't know for sure if he is or isn't, but this is a story of that asks the question, can relationships heal across the veil of death? And I had to decide, like at some point, am I going to open my heart to the possibility that these things that seem to be guidance and these things that seem to be happening are real, or am I going to close off to that? And I kind of actually, to be honest with you, I tested it. I tested closing off and I tested opening, and then when I opened up and acted as though, then the path just kept kind of like making its way forward, and that was writing and trying to sell and promote this book. And so anyway, in a short answer, I feel like Sean would be overjoyed. Yeah.
Well, it's been my joy to share this book with people, and I know they will resonate with it as much as I did. And I think you will reach people, women, on a really deep, deep level. And so, if people want to know more about you and your work, this book, please tell us about everything we need to know about how to get the book and to find out more about you, please.
All right, sure. So I have a website that's called Jessica Waite, WAITE.org. And at the bottom of that, there's also, you can sign up for a free newsletter that I send out once a month or yeah, a little bit less frequently, that tells you a little bit more and you can track. And you can get this book anywhere where you buy books. So online in bookstores and Audible, Kindle store, anywhere that you want. Yeah, you can find it. So
Are you on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram. I don't have an easy to remember handle, but my Instagram handle is endless underscore stories underscore Jess, Jess.
Okay,
Endless
awesome.
stories, Jess.
People can go and find out the updates. And this book arrives July 30th, 2024.
July
Yes?
30th, everywhere that you get books.
Amazing. The day before my birthday. What a good day.
I'm so glad.
Okay, thank you for this. This has been it's been eye-opening to read the book. It's been heartwarming to talk to you about it. And I thank you for your vulnerability and your bravery. You and I both know that is the way to healing, and it's hard AF to do it, which is why a lot of people will avoid it like the plague.
Mhm.
So, for you to be authentic and to walk the talk and to be on your journey and to share it with us, I'm just so deeply grateful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's hard AF to close off too. Like
You're
so,
right.
yeah, yeah,
You're totally right. I
yeah.
have two questions I like to ask my guests on the show to finish, and the first one is more of a sort of blue sky thinking kind of question. I imagine as a woman in perimenopause, a world where a woman is afforded a menopause leave, just like a maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if the Canadian government gave you a year off, paid, with full benefits, what would you do with yourself in those 12 months?
There are two things that I would love to do. One is just walk, just walk across as many parts of everywhere as I can, and just see how beautiful the world is. And then the other thing is I would love to help people tell their stories. Like I have, as I've written this book, I've found that I have some skill as an editor and that I have some skill as a listener, like just to and a cheerleader, and so I would like to help other people like get their stories out of them because I just find it it's so satisfying and Yeah, wonderful. So that is what I would do.
I love it. I love it. And final question is, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
When I would just say it's gonna be okay. I think of that line from The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, "Everything will be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, it's not the end." So that it's so funny and cute and very frustrating when things are not okay to hear that, but just remembering it's all part of the ebb and flow of life.
And this is beautiful. And it reminds me this lovely book you've written is also really funny. I don't know how you managed to pull that off when you're talking about the stuff you did, but man, did you ever do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The information and other content provided in this show, or in any linked materials, is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. We are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Seek your doctor's opinion. If you or any other person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have heard in this podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this page and in this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution. Thank you.